Rain lashed against the black granite of the Moretti family tomb, but the man standing in the shadows didn't feel the cold. He only felt rage. Lorenzo Moretti, the most feared Don in Chicago, had come to visit his mother's grave alone. But someone was already there. A woman. A waitress in a cheap, soaked uniform, kneeling in the mud, sobbing uncontrollably. Lorenzo unholstered his gun, ready to eliminate the intruder. But then he heard her whisper 5 words that froze the blood in his veins. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you." Who was she? And why did she hold the key to the secret that killed his mother? The truth would burn the city to the ground. The cemetery was empty. Save for the dead and the dangerous, Lorenzo Moretti adjusted the collar of his black trench coat. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. It had been 3 days since Isabella Moretti, the matriarch of the family and the only person Lorenzo had ever truly loved, was lowered into the ground. The official report said heart failure. Lorenzo knew better. In his world, hearts didn't just fail, they were stopped. He stepped off the paved path, his Italian leather shoes sinking slightly into the wet grass. He wanted 5 minutes of silence to talk to her, to promise her that he would find whoever poisoned her IV drip at St. Jude's private hospice. But as he rounded the large angel statue guarding the family plot, he stopped dead. There was a figure draped over the fresh mound of dirt. It was a woman. She was small, shivering violently. She wasn't wearing mourning black. She was wearing a pale blue waitress uniform, stained with grease and rain, with a name tag that was too far away to read. Her hair, a dark chestnut, was plastered to her face. Lorenzo's hand moved instinctively to the beretta tucked inside his coat. He didn't have enemies, he had targets, and targets didn't visit his mother's grave. Was this a message? A mockery from the rival Russo family? He moved closer, silent as a ghost. The rain masked his footsteps. He was close enough to smell her. Not expensive perfume, but the scent of stale coffee and vanilla syrup. She was clutching the dirt, her knuckles white. "I tried," she choked out, her voice cracking through the sound of the thunder. "I tried to tell them, Isabella. I saw the chart. I saw what Dr. Thorne changed. But they fired me. They threw me out before I could get back to you." Lorenzo froze. Dr. Thorne? The family physician? The man who had signed the death certificate? The woman lowered her head until her forehead touched the mud. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm so sorry." Lorenzo didn't think. He acted. He closed the distance in 2 strides. He didn't pull the gun, but he grabbed the woman by the back of her collar and hauled her to her feet. She screamed, a sharp, terrified sound that was swallowed by the storm. She spun around, slipping in the mud, and found herself staring into the slate-gray, dead eyes of Lorenzo Moretti. "Who are you?" Lorenzo growled, his voice lower than the thunder. The woman's eyes went wide. She recognized him. Everyone in the city recognized the Prince of Pain. She began to tremble, her hands raising defensively. "Please," she stammered. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I just wanted to say goodbye." "You mentioned Dr. Thorne," Lorenzo said, tightening his grip on her arm. "You said you couldn't save her. Explain. Now." I can't," she whispered, looking around as if the tombstones had ears. "They'll kill me. If they know I'm here, they'll kill me." "Look at me," Lorenzo commanded. He used his free hand to grip her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You are worried about them? You should be worried about me." "Who are you?" She swallowed hard, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "Elena. My name is Elena Vance." "Elena Vance?" He tested the name. It sounded innocent. "And what are you? Elena Vance? A spy? A rat?" "A waitress," she cried out. "Just a waitress at the Rusty Spoon on 5th. But before that, I was a student nurse at St. Jude's." The pieces clicked. A student nurse. Someone invisible. Someone who changed bedpans and checked vitals while the powerful men discussed business in the hallway. "You saw the chart," Lorenzo repeated her words. "I saw the dosage," Elena said, her voice gaining a sudden, desperate strength. "It wasn't heart medication in that bag, Mr. Moretti. It was potassium chloride, enough to stop a heart instantly. When I tried to flag it, the head nurse fired me on the spot for misconduct." 2 hours later, she was dead. Lorenzo felt the rage ignite in his chest, hot and blinding. He released her chin but grabbed her wrist. "You're coming with me." Elena pulled back, terrified. "No, no, please, I have a shift. My landlord. He'll evict me if I don't." "You think you have a choice?" Lorenzo hissed. He dragged her toward the waiting black SUV parked at the cemetery gates. "You just admitted to being the only witness to the murder of Isabella Moretti. You are the most valuable thing in this city right now, Elena. And if you stay here, you're a corpse." He opened the door and shoved her into the leather interior. Elena scrambled to the other side, pressing herself against the window, shivering. Lorenzo slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. As he started the engine, he looked at her in the rearview mirror. "From this moment on, Elena, you belong to the Moretti family, and God help you if you're lying." The drive to the Moretti estate was silent. Elena Vance hugged her knees to her chest, trying to stop her teeth from chattering. She knew she shouldn't have gone to the grave. It was stupid, reckless. But Isabella had been the only patient who treated Eleanor like a human being, not a servant. Isabella had told her stories about her son, the boy who lost his way, the boy who needed saving. Looking at the back of Lorenzo's head, Elena didn't see a boy who needed saving. She saw a predator. The car crunched over the gravel driveway of a mansion that looked more like a fortress. High walls, security cameras, and armed guards at the gate. Lorenzo parked the car and got out. He opened her door. "Out!" Elena stepped out. The rain had stopped, but the air was freezing. She was still in her thin, wet uniform. "I need to go home," she whispered. "My brother, he's waiting for me." Lorenzo stopped walking. He turned slowly. "Brother?" "Lucas," she said. "He's 10. He's at the apartment alone. I can't leave him." Lorenzo stared at her. This complicated things. A witness with attachments was a liability, but a witness with attachments was also easy to control. "Give me the address," Lorenzo said, pulling out his phone. "What? No, you can't. Give me the address, Elena," he roared, his patience snapping. "Do you think the people who killed my mother won't find out who you are? You think they won't go to your apartment? If you want your brother to live to see his 11th birthday, you will give me the address?" Elena slumped, defeated. She gave him the address of the run-down tenement building in the south side. Lorenzo dialed a number. "Marco, take a team. Go to this address." He recited the street. "Pick up a kid. Lucas, bring him here. Harm him, and I'll skin you alive. Keep him safe." He hung up and looked at Elena. "He'll be here in an hour. Now, move." He led her into the mansion. It was cold, sterile, and full of expensive art that looked like it had never been enjoyed. He marched her into a large study, lined with mahogany bookshelves. "Sit," he pointed to a leather chair in front of a massive desk. Elena sat. She was dripping water onto the Persian rug. She felt small, dirty, and out of place. Lorenzo went to a side cabinet and poured a glass of amber liquid. Brandy. He downed it in one shot, then poured another. He didn't offer her any. He leaned against the desk, towering over her. "Tell me about Dr. Thorne." Elena took a shaky breath. He came in around 8 p.m. It was after visiting hours. You had just left. Lorenzo flinched. He had left to take a call from a supplier in New York. A call that had lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes was all it took to lose everything. Go on, he said, his voice tight. He was arguing with a man in the hallway. Elena continued, her memory sharpening despite the fear. A tall man, bald, scar above his left eyebrow. Lorenzo's glass shattered in his hand. Elena jumped. Blood dripped from Lorenzo's hand onto the floor, mixing with the brandy, but he didn't seem to notice. A scar above the left eyebrow? Lorenzo asked, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, Elena nodded. Does that mean something? It means, Lorenzo said, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapping his bleeding hand, that the rot goes deeper than I thought. That man is Salvatris, my uncle, my father's brother. Elena gasped. Your own family? In this life, Elena. Lorenzo walked around the desk and sat down, staring at her with an intensity that made her blush. Family is usually the one holding the knife. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file. He tossed a photo across the desk. Is this the man? Elena picked up the photo. It was a surveillance shot of a man entering a club. Bald head, scar, cruel eyes. Yes, she said. That's him. He gave Dr. Thorne an envelope, thick, like it was full of cash. Lorenzo leaned back, closing his eyes. Salvatris wants the seat. He couldn't take it while my mother was alive. She held the deeds to the properties. With her gone. He gets everything, Elena finished. No. Lorenzo opened his eyes. They were burning with a cold, blue fire. He gets nothing. Because I have you. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the study burst open. A man in a suit rushed in, looking panicked. Boss, we have a problem. I told you not to interrupt, Lorenzo snapped. It's the retrieval team, the guard said. Breathless, Marco just called in. The apartment in the south side. It was already hit. Eleanor stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. What? What do you mean, hit? The guard looked at Eleanor, then at Lorenzo. The place was tossed, boss. Firebombs. The whole building is going up. Lucas! Elena screamed. She lunged toward the door, but Lorenzo was faster. He vaulted over the desk and caught her around the waist, holding her back as she thrashed. Let me go! My brother! Let me go! Marco! Lorenzo barked at the guard, struggling to hold the hysterical woman. Where is the boy? We don't know, the guard said grimly. But there was a message spray-painted on the wall. What did it say? It said, trading chips. Bring the girl. Get the boy. Midnight at the docks. Elena went limp in Lorenzo's arms. They have him, she sobbed, collapsing against Lorenzo's chest. Because of me. They have him because of me. Lorenzo looked down at the woman crying against his shirt. He felt the wetness of her tears seeping through. For the first time in years, he felt something other than anger. He felt a debt. He grabbed her shoulders and pushed her back so he could look her in the eye. Listen to me, Elena, he said, his voice turning into a lethal vow. They made a mistake. They took something that belongs to me. He's my brother, she cried. And you are under my protection, Lorenzo declared, which means he is under my protection. I don't just want my mother's killer anymore. Now, I'm going to war. He turned to the guard. Prepare the men, all of them, and get the car. We're going to the docks. But boss, the guard hesitated. Salvatris will have an army waiting. It's a trap. Lorenzo reached into his jacket and pulled out a fresh magazine for his gun. He slid it in with a metallic click that echoed through the room. I know it's a trap, Lorenzo said, looking at Elena. but they're expecting a businessman who wants to make a deal. They aren't expecting a son who just found out who killed his mother. He took off his long trench coat and draped it over Elena's shivering shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of him. "Stay close to me," he told her. "Tonight, Chicago bleeds." The Chicago docks were a graveyard of rusted steel and shipping containers shrouded in fog and the unrelenting rain. The stillness was unnatural. It was the kind of silence that screamed of an ambush. Lorenzo pulled the black SUV behind a stack of crates, killing the headlights. He turned to Elena. She looked terrified, clutching the oversized trench coat around her. But her eyes were fixed on the warehouse ahead. Warehouse 4B. "Stay here," Lorenzo commanded, checking the suppressor on his Beretta. "Lock the doors. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, or if you see anyone else approach the car, you drive. You drive until you hit the police station." "I'm not leaving without Lucas," Elena said, her voice trembling but stubborn. "If you come out there, you'll get him killed. Do you understand?" Lorenzo's voice was harsh, but it was the only way to keep her safe. "Keep your head down." Lorenzo slipped out into the night. He didn't walk. He hunted. He moved through the shadows of the shipping containers, his breathing controlled, his heart rate steady. This was his element. The boardroom was for business. The streets were for war. He spotted 2 snipers on the crane overlooking the warehouse. Amateurs. They were smoking, the cherry of their cigarettes giving away their position in the dark. Salvatrice was arrogant. He thought numbers would beat skill. Lorenzo bypassed the main entrance. He found a side door, welded shut years ago. He pulled a small canister of liquid nitrogen from his tactical belt, a tool he usually reserved for safes, and sprayed the hinges. A swift kick shattered the frozen metal. He was inside. The warehouse was cavernous, lit by flickering halogen bulbs. In the center, tied to a wooden chair, sat a small boy. Lucas. He was bruised, a piece of duct tape over his mouth, his eyes wide with terror. Surrounding him were 10 men, and in the middle, sitting on a crate eating an apple, was Vinny the Butcher Calzone, Salvatrice's right-hand man. "I know you're here, Lorenzo," Vinny shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "Come out, we can make this quick. Sign the territory over to your uncle, and the kid walks. Refuse, and I start sending him home in envelopes." Lorenzo was crouched on a catwalk 30 feet above them. He evaluated the angles. 10 targets. He had 15 rounds in the clip. Doable. But he couldn't risk a stray bullet hitting the boy. He needed a distraction. Suddenly, the warehouse doors groaned. Everyone turned, guns raised. A car engine revved. The black SUV, Lorenzo's SUV, came smashing through the corrugated metal doors, debris flying everywhere. "Elena!" Lorenzo cursed under his breath. The foolish, brave girl. The gunman opened fire on the car. The windshield shattered. Lorenzo didn't waste the chaos. He dropped from the catwalk, landing on top of a stack of pallets behind the gunman. 2 shots. 2 bodies hit the floor before they even knew he was there. "It's him! Kill him!" Vinny screamed, flipping the table for cover. Lorenzo moved like a wraith, a blur of black trench coat and muzzle flashes. He took out 3 men on the left flank, then rolled behind a forklift. Bullets chewed up the concrete around him. The SUV had crashed into a pile of crates, shielding Lucas from the line of fire. The driver's side door opened, and Elena tumbled out. She didn't run away. She ran toward her brother. "Lucas!" she screamed, ripping the tape off his mouth. "Elena, look out!" the boy cried. A gunman stepped out from behind a pillar, aiming his shotgun at Elena's back. Lorenzo saw it. He was out of position. He couldn't get a clear shot. "No!" Lorenzo roared. He broke cover, sprinting across the open floor. He tackled the gunman just as the shotgun blasted. the spray of pellets tearing into Lorenzo's left shoulder instead of Eleanor's spine. The pain was blinding, white-hot fire. Lorenzo grunted, jamming his pistol under the gunman's chin and pulling the trigger. The room fell silent. Vinny was the only one left standing, but his gun was jammed. He looked at Lorenzo, who was bleeding heavily, his expensive suit ruined, eyes glowing with demonic rage. Vinny dropped his gun and raised his hands. "Lorenzo, wait! It's just business!" Lorenzo didn't hesitate. He raised his gun and put a bullet between Vinny's eyes. "Consider the contract terminated," Lorenzo spat. He turned to Elena. She was hugging Lucas, both of them sobbing. She looked up, seeing the blood soaking Lorenzo's shoulder. "You're shot," she gasped. "We have to move," Lorenzo said, his voice tight with pain. "The gunshots will bring the cops, or worse, more of them." He swayed slightly. The adrenaline was fading, and the blood loss was real. Elena scrambled up, pulling Lucas with her. She grabbed Lorenzo's good arm. "Lean on me." "I can walk," he growled, though his vision was swimming. "Shut up and lean on me," she ordered. For the first time in his life, Lorenzo Moretti obeyed. They didn't go back to the mansion. The mansion was compromised. Lorenzo directed Elena to a luxury high-rise downtown. The penthouse was registered under a shell corporation. It was a safe house, equipped with medical supplies, weapons, and encrypted comms. They entered the elevator, the mirrored walls reflecting a gruesome trio. A crying boy, a blood-soaked mob boss, and a waitress who looked like she'd walked through hell. Inside the apartment, the view of Chicago was breathtaking, a sea of gold lights. But no one looked out the window. "Take the boy to the guest room," Lorenzo ordered, collapsing onto a white leather sofa. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Elena nodded, ushering a shell-shocked Lucas into the bedroom. "I'll be right back, Lucas. You're safe now, I promise." She ran back to the living room. Lorenzo had shrugged off his jacket and was trying to cut his shirt open with a pocket knife, but his hand was shaking too much. "Let me," Elena said, taking the knife. Her hands were steady now. The nurse in her had taken over. The panic was gone, replaced by clinical focus. She cut away the fabric. The wound was ugly. The shotgun pellets had shredded the deltoid muscle, but luckily, no bone was shattered. "I need a sewing kit," she said, "and alcohol, high proof." "Bah," Lorenzo gestured vaguely with his head. "Bathroom cabinet for the kit." Elena moved fast. She sterilized the needle with a lighter and poured vodka over the wound. Lorenzo hissed, his jaw clenching so hard a vein popped in his neck, but he didn't cry out. "I have to dig the pellets out before I stitch," she warned him. "This is going to hurt." "Just do it!" Lorenzo gritted out, staring at the ceiling. "Talk to me. Distract me." Eleanor used a pair of sterilized tweezers. "Talk about what?" "Why you?" Lorenzo asked, his breath hitching as she removed the first pellet. "You're a waitress, but you handle a crisis like a soldier. You recognized potassium chloride by sight. You knew how to drive a getaway car. I told you," she said, her focus entirely on the blood and torn flesh. "I was a nursing student." "Bullshit," Lorenzo groaned as she dug for the second pellet. "Nursing students panic. You didn't panic at the docks. You drove into a firefight." Elena paused. She looked at his face, inches from hers. The pain made him look human, vulnerable. "My father," she whispered, resuming her work. "He was like you." Lorenzo's eyes snapped to hers. "Who?" "It doesn't matter. He's dead. He died in prison 10 years ago. He was a cleaner. He specialized in making bodies disappear. Chemicals, acids, poisons." Lorenzo studied her. "A cleaner's daughter." "He taught me chemistry instead of nursery rhymes," Elena said bitterly. "He taught me how to stitch a wound because he couldn't go to hospitals." I spent my childhood patching him up until the police finally kicked down our door. I changed my name. I wanted a normal life. I wanted to save lives, not end them. That's why I became a nurse. And yet, Lorenzo said softly, here you are, back in the life. I did it for Isabella, Elena said, tying off the final stitch. She taped a gauze pad over the wound. And for Lucas. She stood up, wiping her bloody hands on a towel. You're done. You need antibiotics and rest. Lorenzo sat up, testing his arm. It was stiff, but patched. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said, her voice hardening. You dragged us into this. Now tell me how we get out. Your uncle won't stop. No, Lorenzo agreed. He stood up, ignoring the pain. He walked to the window, looking down at the city that wanted him dead. Salvatris is making a move because he thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'm grieving. Aren't you? Elena asked. Lorenzo looked at her, his expression unreadable. Grief is a luxury. I can't afford it. Not until everyone involved in my mother's death is buried. He walked over to a wall safe, hidden behind a painting. He punched in a code. The safe hissed open. Inside were stacks of cash, passports, and a black ledger. He took out the ledger. My mother kept records, Lorenzo said. She didn't trust the banks. She didn't trust Salvatris. If he killed her, it wasn't just for power. It was for this. He opened the book. It was filled with codes. I can't read it, Lorenzo admitted. It's a cipher. She used to say, Lorenzo, the key is in the chemistry. I never understood what she meant. Elena stepped closer. She looked at the page, rows of numbers and letters. C6H1206, 14NAS-A, H2SO4, 22B. Elena's eyes widened. It's not a random cipher, she whispered. These are chemical formulas. Glucose, sulfuric acid. The numbers. They correspond to atomic weights and table positions. Lorenzo looked at her. Can you read it? I think so. Elena traced the lines. It's a list of accounts, offshore accounts, but also names. She pointed to a line near the bottom. NaCN. Judas. Sodium cyanide, she translated. And next to it, Judas. Who is Judas? Lorenzo asked. It's not a who, Elena said, her finger trembling. Look at the date next to it. It's dated 3 days ago. The day she died. Lorenzo's face went pale. She knew. She knew someone close to her was betraying her. Lorenzo? Eleanor looked up, fear returning to her eyes. If Salvatris killed her for this book, and he knows you have it, he won't just send gunmen next time. He'll send an army. Let him come. Lorenzo closed the book with a snap. Now I know what they want, and I know who can decode it. You. Me? Elena stepped back. No, I patched you up. I got my brother back. We are leaving. You can't leave, Lorenzo said, stepping into her space. You are the key, Elena. You said it yourself. The key is in the chemistry. You're the only one who can translate my mother's legacy. Without you, I lose the war. And if I lose, Salvatris will hunt you down anyway just to tie up loose ends. He reached out, touching her cheek with his uninjured hand. His thumb brushed away a smudge of dirt. Stay, he said. It wasn't a command this time. It was a plea. Help me destroy them. And I swear on my mother's grave, I will give you and your brother a life where you never have to look over your shoulder again. Elena looked into his eyes. She saw the monster the city feared, but she also saw the man who had taken a bullet for her. She felt a pull, a magnetic, terrifying attraction to the danger he represented. I need to check on Lucas, she whispered, breaking the trance. She turned and fled to the guest room. Lorenzo watched her go. He knew he was manipulating her. He knew he was dragging her deeper into hell. But he also knew that for the first time since his mother died, he didn't feel alone in the dark. The next morning, the sun rose over a city that felt different. The air was heavy with pending violence. In the penthouse, the mood was tense. Lucas was eating cereal at the kitchen island, watching cartoons with the volume low. He was resilient. Elena, give him that. But he kept glancing at the door, flinching at sudden noises. Lorenzo was already dressed in a fresh suit from the safe-house wardrobe. His arm was in a sling, hidden beneath his jacket. He was on the phone, barking orders in Italian. Elena sat at the table with the ledger. She had been up all night decoding. "It's worse than you thought," she said, as Lorenzo hung up. "Tell me." Lorenzo sat opposite her, pouring black coffee. "Salvatrice isn't working alone." Elena slid a piece of paper across the table. "Your mother was tracking payments. Large payments going out of the family accounts to a shell company called Ethelgard. Do you know it?" "No," Lorenzo frowned. "Never heard of it. I looked it up on the secure browser," Elena said. "It's a pharmaceutical holding company. They own St. Jude's Hospice." Lorenzo slammed his fist on the table. "The hospice where she died. So the owners were in on it." "It gets deeper," Elena continued, her voice dropping. "The payments to Ethelgard weren't authorized by your mother. They were authorized by you." Lorenzo froze. "What?" "Your digital signature is on the transfers." Elena pointed to the decoded line. "Millions of dollars, funneled out of the Moretti accounts into the hospice owners' pockets." "That's impossible," Lorenzo hissed. "I never signed those." "Someone with your access did," Elena said. "Someone who has your passwords, your biometrics." Lorenzo stood up, pacing the room. The list of people with that level of access was tiny. Him. His mother. And the intercom at the front gate buzzed. Lorenzo checked the monitor. It was a man in a grey suit, tall, sharp features, carrying a briefcase. "It's Consigliere Rossi," Lorenzo said, relaxing slightly. "My lawyer. He's the only one I trust besides my mother. He must have found out where we are." "Are you sure?" Elena asked, clutching the ledger. "Lorenzo, the signature." "Rossi has been with the family for 30 years, Lorenzo said, heading to the door. "He carried me when I was a baby. If I can't trust him, I'm already dead." He unlocked the heavy steel door. Giovanni Rossi walked in. He looked tired. He saw Lorenzo's sling and sighed. "I heard about the docks. You're making a mess, Lorenzo." "They took a kid, Giovanni," Lorenzo said. Salvatrice crossed the line. "Salvatrice is an animal," Rossi agreed, setting his briefcase down on the table. He looked at Elena, then at Lucas. "And these must be the guests. This is Elena," Lorenzo introduced her. "She's helping me go through Mother's ledger." Rossi's eyes flickered. It was a micro-expression, gone in an instant, but Elena saw it. It was fear. "The ledger?" Rossi let out a strained laugh. "Isabella's scribbles? Lorenzo, that book is nonsense. She was confused near the end. The medication made her paranoid." "It's not nonsense," Elena spoke up, standing her ground. "It's a chemical cipher, and it shows that someone stole millions using Lorenzo's signature." Rossi stared at Elena. The warmth drained from his face, leaving a cold, calculated mask. "Is that so?" Rossi said softly. He turned to Lorenzo. "Lorenzo, give me the book. This girl is clearly trying to manipulate you. She's a stranger, probably working for Salvatrice." "She saved my life last night," Lorenzo said, his voice cooling. He stepped between Rossi and Elena. "Why are you sweating, Giovanni?" "I'm not sweating," Rossi said, reaching into his jacket. "I'm just worried about you. You're not thinking clearly." "Show me your hands," Lorenzo commanded. "Lorenzo, be reasonable." "Hands!" Lorenzo roared, drawing his gun with his good hand. Rossi froze. Then a sad smile touched his lips. "I told Salvatrice this wouldn't work. I told him you were too sharp." "You," Lorenzo whispered, the betrayal hitting him harder than the shotgun pellets. "You forged my signature. You helped kill her." "She was going to cut us all off," Rossi snapped, his facade crumbling. "She wanted to go legitimate, Lorenzo. She was going to donate the fortune to charity, to cleanse the family soul. We built this empire. Me, your father, Salvatrice. We weren't going to let her flush it down the toilet." "So you poisoned her," Elena said, disgust in her voice. "It was mercy," Rossi yelled. He pulled a detonator from his pocket. "Don't!" Lorenzo shouted. "The building is rigged." Rossi smiled, his thumb hovering over the button. "I knew you'd come here. It's the only safe house not on the main grid. Salvatrice is downstairs with the cleanup crew. Give me the ledger, Lorenzo. And I let the girl and the boy go. You stay. We end this like men." Lorenzo looked at Elena. She was terrified, holding Lucas tight. "Deal," Lorenzo said. He lowered his gun. "Let them leave. You get the book. You get me." "No," Elena cried. "Lorenzo, he's lying." "Go, Elena," Lorenzo said, not looking at her. He tossed the ledger onto the table. "Take Lucas. Take the fire escape in the kitchen. Go." Rossi nodded at the door. "Wise choice." Elena hesitated. She looked at the ledger, then at Lorenzo. She grabbed Lucas's hand and ran for the kitchen. Lorenzo waited until he heard the back door close. "Okay, Giovanni," Lorenzo said, his voice deadly calm. "You have the book. Now, explain to me why I shouldn't kill you before you press that button." "Because," Rossi sneered, picking up the ledger, "you're already dead." He pressed the button. Nothing happened. Rossi pressed it again, frantically. Lorenzo smirked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, blinking device, a signal jammer. "Elena noticed the unauthorized transfers," Lorenzo said, stepping forward. "But I noticed something too. When you walked in, your phone didn't connect to the Wi-Fi. You were blocking signals. So I turned on my jammer. I figured if you were blocking comms, you didn't want anyone listening, or you were trying to trigger a remote signal." Rossi's face went grey. He dropped the detonator and lunged for his gun. Lorenzo fired once. The bullet caught Rossi in the knee. He screamed and collapsed. Lorenzo walked over and kicked the gun away. He stood over the man who had been a second father to him. "You're right, Giovanni," Lorenzo said, aiming the gun at Rossi's heart. "Isabella wanted to cleanse the family soul. I think I'll start with the trash." Bang! Lorenzo stood in the silence of the room. It was done. The traitor was dead. But the war wasn't over. Salvatrice was downstairs. The kitchen door burst open. Lorenzo spun around, gun raised. It was Elena. She was breathless. "I didn't leave," she said. "I told you to go," Lorenzo shouted. "Lucas is in the stairwell," she said. "But I came back because I remembered something about the chemical ethyl guard." "What?" "It's highly flammable," Elena said, her eyes blazing. "And Rossi said Salvatrice is downstairs, in the lobby?" "Yes." "The building's ventilation system." Elena pointed to the vent on the wall. "If Rossi rigged the building with explosives, he likely used C4 or Semtex. But if we use the cleaning supplies under the sink, ammonia and bleach, we can create chloramine gas. We can pump it into the ventilation shaft." Lorenzo stared at her. A slow smile spread across his face. "You really are your father's daughter," he said. "Let's smoke them out," Elena said. The penthouse kitchen became a makeshift laboratory. Elena moved with frantic precision, grabbing bottles of industrial-strength bleach and ammonia cleaner from under the sink. "We need masks," she said, her voice tight. "Anything to filter the air. Wet towels. Now." Lorenzo grabbed designer hand towels from the bathroom, soaking them in the sink. He handed one to Elena and kept one for himself. "How long do we have?" Lorenzo asked, watching her pour the thick yellow bleach into a metal bucket. "Once I mix the ammonia, the reaction is instant," Elena explained, her eyes stinging already from the fumes. "Chloramine gas. It burns the eyes, the throat, the lungs. In high concentrations, it's fatal within minutes. It's heavy. It will sink through the vents, straight to the lobby." Lorenzo moved to the main ventilation shaft in the hallway. He ripped the decorative grate off the wall. The sound of the large HVAC fans hummed deep within the building. "Salvatris brought 20 men," Lorenzo said, checking his gun. "He wants a siege. Let's give him a massacre." Elena carried the buckets, her face wrapped in the wet towel. "Ready." "Do it." She poured the ammonia into the bleach. Instantly, a thick, white, acrid fog billowed upwards. Elena choked, stumbling back as Lorenzo kicked the buckets into the open shaft. The massive intake fans sucked the poisonous cloud downwards with a hungry whoosh. They slammed the utility closet door shut and sealed the cracks with more wet towels. Then they waited. 30 seconds passed in agonizing silence. Then the sounds began echoing up through the pipes. Coughing, wet, hacking coughs that turned into retching. Then screams. Screams of men whose eyes were burning out of their skulls, whose lungs were dissolving. Gunfire erupted below. Blind, panicked shooting as Salvatris's men fired at an enemy they couldn't see, an enemy they were breathing in. "Now," Lorenzo grabbed Elena's hand. "Get Lucas from the stairwell. We take the service stairs down to the garage. Move!" They sprinted into the concrete stairwell. Lucas was curled in a corner on the landing below, his hands over his ears. Elena grabbed him, wrapping a wet towel around his face. "Don't breathe through your nose, Lucas. Mouth only." "Shallow breaths," she instructed. They descended into hell. The service stairwell wasn't airtight. Wisps of the white gas curled around the banisters. By the 10th floor, their eyes were watering uncontrollably. By the 5th floor, Lucas was wheezing. They burst out onto the ground floor level, near the rear service exit. The main lobby, visible through glass doors 50 feet away, was a war zone of yellow fog. Bodies were writhing on the marble floor, but the back exit wasn't clear. 2 of Salvatris's men, stationed outside the gas zone, saw them emerge. "There, blast them!" Lorenzo shoved Elena and Lucas behind a concrete pillar, just as automatic gunfire chipped away the stone inches from their heads. Lorenzo peeked out, fired twice. One gunman dropped, the other took cover behind a dumpster and kept suppressing fire on their position. "I can't get a clean shot," Lorenzo growled, wiping tears from his stinging eyes. Elena looked at the fire alarm box on the wall next to them. "Lorenzo, the sprinklers." He understood instantly. If the gas was bad, wet gas was worse. The water would react further with the chemicals, creating a heavier, corrosive mist. Lorenzo fired at the alarm box. It shattered. Instantly, the emergency klaxons began to blare, and the overhead sprinklers hissed to life, showering the entire ground floor. The gunman behind the dumpster wailed as the water hitting the residual gas on his clothes and skin began to burn. He stood up, clawing at his face, distracted by the pain. Lorenzo stood up and ended his suffering with a single shot to the chest. "Car. Now." Lorenzo pointed to a nondescript grey sedan parked in the service bay, the building manager's car. He hot-wired it in seconds. As they sped out of the garage, tires screeching, Elena looked back. The luxury high-rise was vomiting white smoke from its lower vents, a monument to their desperate escape. "Where do we go?" Elena asked, clutching a shivering Lucas in the back seat. "There's nowhere safe in Chicago." Lorenzo looked in the rearview mirror. His face was grim, his eyes still red from the gas. "We go where it all started. he said. "North. To the cabin." The Moretti hunting cabin was 4 hours north of the city, hidden deep in the snowy wilderness of Wisconsin. It was a fortress of timber and stone, built by Lorenzo's grandfather for times when the heat in Chicago got too intense. It was off the grid. No cell service, no neighbors, just acres of snow-covered pines and frozen silence. They had been there for 24 hours. Lorenzo sat by the massive stone fireplace, cleaning a high-powered hunting rifle. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the bearskin rugs. His shoulder throbbed, a constant reminder of the docks, but he ignored it. Elena was in the kitchen area, making soup from canned goods stored in the pantry. Lucas was asleep in one of the bunk rooms, exhausted from the trauma. The domesticity of the scene was bizarre, terrifyingly normal. Elena brought Lorenzo a bowl of soup. She sat on the rug near his feet. "How long can we stay here?" she asked softly. "Until I know Salvatrice is dead," Lorenzo said, not looking up from the rifle scope he was calibrating. "The gas wouldn't have killed him. He's too tough, like a cockroach. He'll have burns, lung damage, but he's alive. And he's coming. How can he find us? Nobody knows about this place." "Rossi knew," Lorenzo said darkly. "Rossi had the ledger in his briefcase when I shot him. There was likely a tracker in the case. Salvatrice has it now." Elena shivered, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. "So we're just waiting for them?" Lorenzo stopped cleaning the gun. He set it down and looked at her. In the firelight, the hard lines of his face seemed softer. "I should have let you go at the cemetery," he admitted. It was the closest thing to an apology she would ever get. "I dragged you into my war." "You didn't drag me," Elena said, surprising herself. "I walked in. I couldn't let your mother die without someone knowing the truth." "Why?" Lorenzo asked, genuinely puzzled. "You owed us nothing." Elena looked into the fire. "Because when I was a student nurse, terrified and hiding who my father was, your mother was the only one who saw me. She told me, 'Elena, we are not defined by the blood of our fathers. We are defined by the blood we choose to spill, or the blood we choose to save.'" Lorenzo felt a lump in his throat. That sounded exactly like Isabella. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the rug. Her skin was warm. "You saved mine," he whispered. The air between them changed. The danger outside felt miles away. There was only the fire, the snow against the windows, and the undeniable pull between two people who had seen the worst of humanity together. Elena leaned in. Lorenzo met her halfway. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate, fueled by adrenaline and grief and the terrifying realization that they might not live through the night. It was a collision of two broken worlds. Suddenly, Lorenzo pulled back. He froze, his head tilted toward the window. "What is it?" Elena whispered, breathless. "Silence," Lorenzo murmured. The wind stopped. He stood up, grabbing the hunting rifle and extinguishing the oil lamp, plunging the room into firelit darkness. "Get Lucas," he ordered, his voice back to the cold monotone of the dawn. "Go to the root cellar beneath the kitchen trapdoor. Do not come out until I open it." "They're here," Elena stated. It wasn't a question. "Go." Elena ran to wake Lucas. Lorenzo moved to the window, peering through a crack in the heavy curtains. Outside, against the stark white snow, he saw shadows moving between the trees. 6 of them. They were wearing white winter camouflage gear, carrying assault rifles. They were professionals, mercenaries hired by Salvatrice to finish what his street thugs couldn't. And behind them, limping heavily, relying on a cane, was a man with bandages covering half his face. Salvatrice. He had come to watch his nephew die. Lorenzo waited, He was outnumbered, 6-1. But this was his land. He knew every tree, every ridge. The front door exploded inward, kicked open by the lead mercenary. Lorenzo didn't fire from the window. He was already positioned in the loft above the living area. As the first two mercenaries rushed in, scanning the room with flashlights, Lorenzo opened up with the hunting rifle. Crack, crack. 2 chest shots, the rounds, designed to take down elk, punched through their tactical vests like paper. They dropped instantly. "Contact front! He's in the loft!" someone yelled outside. Bullets shredded the timber walls of the cabin, wood splinters raining down like confetti. Lorenzo rolled away from the edge of the loft, reloading. "Burn him out!" Salvatrice's raspy, chemically burned voice screamed from outside. A Molotov cocktail smashed through the front window. The bearskin rug caught fire. The cabin began to fill with smoke. Lorenzo knew he couldn't stay inside. He had to take the fight to the snow. He slipped out a back window, dropping into a deep snowdrift. The cold was shocking, biting through his suit instantly. He circled the cabin. He saw 2 mercenaries near the front porch, preparing another firebomb. Lorenzo moved like a wolf. He came up behind them, using his knife on the first one. Silent, brutal. The second one turned, raising his rifle, but Lorenzo was too close. He grabbed the barrel, deflecting it upwards as it fired, the shot echoing uselessly into the night sky. Lorenzo delivered a crushing headbutt, followed by 2 rounds from his Beretta at point-blank range. 4 down, 2 left, plus Salvatrice. Lorenzo scanned the tree line. He saw movement near the woodpile. He fired, a cry of pain. 5 down. Suddenly, a shot rang out from a direction he didn't expect. Lorenzo felt a sledgehammer blow to his right thigh. He crumbled into the snow, his leg useless. Salvatrice stepped out from behind a thick oak tree 20 yards away. He was holding a smoking pistol. His face, half covered in burn bandages, looked grotesque in the moonlight. "Look at you, nephew," Salvatrice wheezed, limping closer. "The great Lorenzo Moretti, bleeding in the snow like a stuck pig." Lorenzo tried to raise his gun, but his hand was shaking from shock and cold. "You killed her," Lorenzo spat, his teeth chattering. "For money, you pathetic worm." "For survival," Salvatrice roared, kicking snow into Lorenzo's face. "You don't know, do you? The great detective didn't figure it out." Salvatrice reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled, blood-stained envelope, the one Rossi had taken from the ledger. "Rossi read it before you shot him. It wasn't just accounts, you idiot. It was her last will and testament." Salvatrice threw the paper onto Lorenzo's chest. "Read it. Read what your beloved, sainted mother did to us." Lorenzo, his vision blurring, picked up the paper. It was Isabella's handwriting. "To my son Lorenzo, if you are reading this, then my plan worked. My heart was failing. My love. The doctors gave me a month, at best. But I couldn't die leaving you surrounded by vipers. I knew Salvatrice and Rossi were stealing from us. I knew they wanted the throne. So I forced their hand. I transferred the money to the hospice, not to donate it, but to make them think I was giving away their inheritance. I knew it would provoke them to kill me. I used myself as bait, Lorenzo, to draw the rats out into the light so you could see them for what they are. I had to die so you would finally have the reason to do what needs to be done. Cleanse the family. Burn it down and build something better. Forgive me for leaving you alone. But I know you won't be alone for long. There are good people in the world, if you choose to see them. Love, Mother." Lorenzo stared at the paper. Tears froze on his cheeks. She hadn't just been murdered. She had orchestrated her own death as a final lesson for him, a final gift of strategic vengeance. "She was crazy," Salvatrice spat, standing over Lorenzo, aiming his gun at Lorenzo's head. She signed her own death warrant just to expose me. Well, it didn't work. I'm still standing, and you're done. Salvatris cocked the hammer of his gun. Say hello to Mummy for me. Bang! The shot echoed through the frozen forest. But Lorenzo didn't die. Salvatris jerked violently. A look of utter confusion crossed his burned face. He staggered sideways, dropping his gun, clutching his neck where a small red flower was blooming against the white bandages. He collapsed face first into the snow. Lorenzo turned his head weakly. Standing on the porch of the burning cabin, illuminated by the flames, was Elena. She was holding Lorenzo's hunting rifle, the barrel smoking slightly. Her face was set in stone. A cleaner's daughter, indeed. She dropped the rifle and ran to him, falling into the snow beside him. "Lorenzo, stay with me!" He looked up at the night sky, then at her face. The fire from the cabin was getting higher, warming them against the deadly cold. "It's over," he whispered. "She won. We won." The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, state troopers attracted by the fire and gunfire. Elena looked at the approaching lights, then down at the Don bleeding in her arms. "They'll arrest you," she said, panic rising. "Let them come," Lorenzo said, a strange peace settling over him. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive, the backup of the ledger Elena had deciphered. He pressed it into her hand. "Take Lucas. Go out the back way, the snowmobile in the shed. Go north to Canada. There's an account number on there. It's enough money for 10 lifetimes." "I'm not leaving you," she said fiercely. "You have to," Lorenzo smiled weakly. "Someone has to tell Lucas that the bad guys lost." He kissed her hand, leaving a smear of his blood on her skin. "Go, Elena Vance. Choose to save a life." Elena looked at him one last time, tears streaming down her face. Then she stood up, grabbed the flash drive, and ran back towards the cabin to get her brother before the police arrived. Lorenzo lay back in the snow, watching the flames consume his grandfather's cabin, watching the ashes rise up to meet the stars. He closed his eyes and listened to the approaching sirens, waiting for whatever fate had in store for the last of the Morettis. Elena and Lucas vanished into the night, armed with a fortune and a secret that could topple empires. Lorenzo Moretti survived the gunshot wound and was arrested. But with Salvatris and Rossi dead, and the ledger gone, the charges won't stick. The Don will walk free. But the man who walks out of that prison cell won't be the same man who went in. He knows the truth now, that his mother's love was the deadliest weapon of all.